Hello, welcome to Productions MJC. My name is Mark. Well, there's something I want to discuss, and I didn't really want to discuss it, but it's got to be discussed a little bit in detail. Perspective tricks. I happened to get a comment on some videos from Isaiah 40:22, and he gave me a link to a movie, a YouTube video. So I went out and I took a look at it. It's from somebody called Stinky Cash, and Stinky Cash is incredibly confused. And Isaiah 40:22, if you believe what this person is saying, no wonder you're commenting and doing some of the crazy stuff that you're telling me about. Because let me go back to one of my videos. I take a picture of a building. I'm miles and miles away from it. It's 50 feet tall, but all you can see is the roof, and that's because I'm 2.5 feet off the water. And yet, even though there's the trees on the right and everything else, and there's no mirage, you can tell it's water. The water horizon is blocking your view. I raise up 25 feet. I don't even get any closer. I simply gain in height and elevation 25 feet, and then boom, you can see the building. That is on a curve. That is because of curvature of the earth. Now, Stinky Cash, I'm going to analyze his video and kind of, give it a play-by-play later on here. But I wanted to show you this because his explanation of why this is so is just hysterical. He doesn't really understand what he's talking about, but he tries to sound like he is. Because, see, the proportions are the same. It's just I've raised up so I can see the bottom. It's like you're peeking around the edge of a ball. On a flat earth, this wouldn't happen, but he said, oh, yes, it would. Because the horizon, in my video, I explain, in my analysis, I'll explain what he's doing. But he's totally confusing vanishing point and horizon. He doesn't understand the terms he's talking about. And see, when I'm closer to the water, you can tell I'm closer to the water, and you can tell the distant object, you can't see as much of it. And this doesn't happen for this building either. If you've seen my other video about the flat water tricks that they do, the flat earth video makers, they talk about different things and try to make it sound, well, a little more plausible than what Stinky Cash is doing. And if you remember, in my other video, I explained that this is a shot. Now, this is east to west. The other one was south to north. This is east to west. Same place. I'm 2.5 feet off the water. Now I'm 25 feet off the water. And you can tell it's the same place, but it's not the same place in height only. I mean, it's exactly the same place. There's the boat. There's the building. This is 2.5 feet off the water. Boom, 25 feet off the water. You're looking around the edge of a ball. That's the way it works. But Stinky Cash tries to explain it in a different way that is just so nonsensical. It's not even... I don't understand how people believe it, because there's the level of the water at 2.5 feet. There's the level of the water at 25 feet. So without further ado, let's just get into Stinky Cash's analysis of the world and try to you can't make sense of it, but let's try. Here we go. Isaiah 40:20 sent me a link and said, check this out because this is really interesting. It's by Stinky Cash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some things here that this is how some flat earthers, not all, because there are some flat earthers that actually have the exact opposite opinion that this guy does. They can't even decide which way it's supposed to go, so they just throw both versions out there. Some people throw one, some throw the other. This guy actually, for the most part, throws one version out and then turns right around and bounces back and explains the exact same thing, but then claims it's something else. So, without further ado, what he does, he calls the vanishing point the horizon and confuses the two and says, is there horizon on a flat plane? Then he tries to explain it through various methods. Now, he's talking about the vanishing point and then interchanging the horizon, which is totally different. Because if the vanishing point were the horizon, you wouldn't see anything beyond the vanishing point because the thing has vanished. Okay? And notice the lines get smaller as they go into the distance. This is how we perceive it. And he does explain some things about... Now, see how big the sun is? We'll come back to that. But there's the buildings. The bottom of the buildings are missing. And he says, well, the vanishing point, the horizon, he confuses the both of them and intermixes terms. He says they're one and the same, and yet they're different. And then he talks about this. Well, as we go forward, he talks about some things and explains stuff. And interestingly enough, he says that us globers get it wrong, and then he claims something from here. But let's get back to this right here. Here's the vanishing point, okay? And the horizontal line he calls the horizon. And he says it's a fixed point. It's totally fixed. It doesn't change. Then he turns around later on and explains things, but you can see his little mouse going around. And especially here, you can see that even though these are the same size, they appear to get smaller and smaller and smaller until all lines converge. And you know, if there was a bus or a train or a plane or a person walking, anything that moves away would get smaller, right? And he says people don't understand vanishing point because they don't teach it in school. And apparently he didn't take art class because perspective and vanishing points are drawing terms. They don't exist actually in reality because it doesn't vanish. Things just get so small we can't see them, and if you zoomed in with a telescope you could see it again. That's part of the claim of the flat earth, is boats really don't go over the horizon, they just get really small, but if you zoom back in, boom, there they are again. Which this flat earther, to some point in his video, he denounces that whole theory. No, the reason the boat disappears from the bottom, he fully admits the bottom up disappearance of a boat happens. But he explains it in such a nonsensical way, I just couldn't resist. I got to do this. And he says, see, if you walk down there, all of these doors and doorways and the ceiling, it's all the same height, but our eyes don't perceive it that way. But that has nothing to do with what's happening in reality, because as you walk down there and get closer to that end, you see that they're still the same size, they haven't gotten smaller. But if you were to roll a ball down there, like a bowling ball down that hallway, it would get smaller. It would follow these. If the bowling ball was exactly this wide near you, as you rolled it down the corridor, the bowling ball would get smaller, and it would fit within those guidelines. Okay? Now, he says, this is what's happening in reality on top. This is how we perceive it. And that's what he calls perspective, and is our actual perception. And we see the ground rise up, and this is how we see it. But what he fails to show you is it isn't showing eye level. The eye naturally looks down until we cross and we come to the horizon. We're not looking flat laser-like level. We are looking down even though we don't understand we are. This down here perfectly explains that perception. We are looking down, but we don't know it. So, as he goes along, he says, flat earthers explain perspective and the horizon, as he calls it, but it's actually he's indicating the vanishing point over there on the right. So, as he goes along, he says, his dog, this is how he looks. This is what's happening in reality. That's what he's doing. Okay? But if you were to tilt this just a little bit, where the position on the right over here was actually touching this line, you would notice that the dog is actually looking down. We look down. to the horizon. It's not the horizon rises up to our level of eyesight. We look down to the horizon. Our attention is naturally drawn to it, but it's such a small angle we don't realize that we are looking down. So he says here, flat Earth deniers get it all wrong. They say on a flat Earth, the sun would move like this, and then he explains later how he says, but notice the difference between these balls. Notice the difference between each of them. It's exactly the same. And he says, well, that's the illustration. And notice these lines get longer as the item moves away from them. Okay? Keep that in mind. And he explains on a boat, the boat on the ocean, somehow magically, even though you can see all the way to the bottom, you can see the whole item, somehow near the vanishing point, in his illustration later on, the bottom of the boat magically disappears. It has to in his explanation. So see, this is how he explains, this is what the dog sees, okay? But this is what's happening in reality. Several problems. Now, here you can easily see that the dog can see the bottom of the box all the way to the vanishing point. And notice the box is getting smaller as it goes farther away because it's following what's called the lines of convergence. But notice the sun magically on a flat Earth doesn't get smaller. It stays the same size visually. So in other words, everything else shrinks in size as it goes away from you. A plane, a boat, people, a car. But the sun and moon on his flat Earth don't get smaller. They stay the same size. There are some flat earthers that claim they do the exact opposite. They say no, the sun gets smaller because they realize that in order to use this illustration, the sun has to get small and follow these lines of convergence. It can't magically grow towards the end. But this genius, he has his magically just expand in size, in just mammoth proportions. Okay? See how the boat's getting smaller? Boat's getting smaller, boat's getting smaller. It's following a line of convergence. Okay? And he explains that, well, once it passes the horizon, as he calls it, the vanishing point, then the dog magically sees, once it's past the vanishing point, well, in his mind, it doesn't vanish. It magically, since it's past that point, even though now you see the dog's looking up, but the dog wouldn't be looking up. The dog would be looking at the horizon, not up towards the sails. But he says that's what it'll look like. But see, now the boat is not following the lines of convergence. This is a line of convergence. That is a line of convergence. It's supposed to disappear to a tiny dot, but now the boat has suddenly grown in size and the bottom of it's disappeared. Because this flat earth liar, he's a video maker and he's a liar, he knows it, because he understands that in reality people have zoomed in on boats that are past the horizon, which he misconstrues the two again. He's seen it. He knows they disappear from the bottom up, so he's trying his best to explain how that happens, because he knows it is reality. There are other flat earthers that will tell you that no, that doesn't happen. All you got to do is zoom in and you can magically see the bottom of the boat again. Which, at least this liar making this video does understand that isn't what's happening. It really does disappear from the bottom up. So he's trying to finagle a way to make it sound like there is this magic horizon that's a fixed point. He said the horizon is a fixed point beyond your vision where you can't perceive it. Now, the problem that and see, he says once it gets beyond a certain point, you can't see it again. It's not that it's gone around a curve. It's just reached this magic point, which is well beyond the vanishing point. Even the boat beyond the vanishing point is beyond the vanishing point. It should be a little dot, not have just half the bottom missing, because the vanishing point isn't just 3 miles away. So here he is trying to explain the sun. And if you'll notice, these lines are getting longer. This line is certain length, this is longer, the next one is longer even still. Okay, well, as you and I know, as an airplane moves away from you, it moves very fast between the first two. If it's traveling at exactly the same speed, then it appears to actually be moving slower. It moves in what's called a logarithmic fashion. It moves the same speed, but as the plane gets farther and farther away from you, it appears to slow down, even though it's really going the exact same speed. Whereas the sun doesn't do that. The sun moves across the arc of the sky in exactly the same speed. It's calculated roughly 15 degrees per hour, and it stays that way. And that's how a sundial is built, is to work off that principle. But it can't do that in the flat Earth world, simply because as it gets farther away from you, that bottom line is quite a bit longer than the first line. So the sun not only has to grow exponentially larger as it moves away, it has to actually gain speed in order to maintain a visual constant speed, which doesn't happen. Because for the observer, if it's moving faster for you, why isn't it moving faster for a person, say, 400 miles away from you? How can it move fast for one person and move slow for another person? See, it doesn't physically work. But that's what he wants to do. That's what he wants to show you. Because between these two positions, and see how large that sun is. I mean, this sun, it's a giant of a sun to stay the same size on that Earth. He says, now see what I mean? He has drawn in the lines of convergence to a dot. But what is not the sun? The sun is not a dot. Well, this flat Earth liar, he does know. And he says when it dips below that magic line of vision, that's why you see it sink into the sun, into the ocean or wherever. Well, the problem with that is that this flat Earth liar knows the sun stays the same size and explains that this is what's happening. I mean, look at the size of that dot, but see how the sun does not conform to the lines of convergence. It actually grows in size dramatically. He says this is not what you will see. The problem is there are other flat Earth video makers out there that tell you that is exactly what's happening, and they try to explain it away with video tricks of the sun. So you have two opposing people. Go out, you can find it. I think is it p-brane or Taboo Conspiracy, Jeranism, Deep Inside the Rabbit Hole, or whoever. They say it shrinks. This guy hasn't got the memo, because he's saying, no, it stays the same size. Why? Because he knows it stays the same size. Especially the moon. You can't pull the same video trick with the moon that you can with the sun, because the light is so bright from the sun, it screws up the camera until it gets right near, well, and especially curved lenses like your fisheye lenses and such, they actually distort it. Now he says, well, for the sun to shrink, it would have to be at the same eye level. Notice the sun in his is nearly following a line of convergence, but in his other explanation, it doesn't. It grows dramatically. Everything else shrinks. Planes, trains, boats. Have you ever looked out the window of an airplane when you're flying 5 miles above the earth? Does the city look the same size as when you were standing in the streets? No. It shrinks in size. So In his example, the sun stays the same size, which means it must be growing to mammoth, hysterical portions. Then he explains, oh, this is a classic. He said there's a horizon out there. It's a fixed position at this point right here. It's a fixed position right here. So stuff beyond that, beyond the horizon. And remember, he confuses intentionally horizon and vanishing point, because this is his vanishing point. Well, the city hasn't vanished. He says, why can't you see the streets? Well, that's because it's magically beyond the vanishing point. He says, see, it's 3 miles. 3 miles is his horizon. But he says, this isn't 3 miles away, it's 5 miles away. Now it's 7, now it's 9, now it's gone. And how does that work? Well, in his world, it's because it's like the boat. It's magically beyond the vanishing point. But if you know art, if you've even studied the least bit amount of art, you understand that this is hysterically stupid. This is the dumbest explanation. He obviously hasn't gotten the memo to say that the sun does shrink. He hasn't gotten the memo about things because, see, the boat magically isn't like it should be. So as he tries to explain this, if you zoom in, you'll only see this much. That's why on Lake Ontario, from Alcott Beach, the CN tower observed in Toronto, Canada, you can only see half of it. Well, that's because the horizon is only 3 miles away. The vanishing point is only 3 miles away, yet you can still see a building 39 miles away? No, why people believe this is beyond me. But there are people that believe this stinky cash. I mean, this is a wonderful video. This is shown by a flat earther. Does it look level flat or does it tilt away? Do you know how far this shot is? No. But even at 40 miles, the top of the building is going to be farther away from the bottom by maybe 1 or 2 degrees. You can't tell the difference. But he's expecting you to see the building laying back on its side like it was 500 miles away. But at 30, 25 feet, 25 miles, whatever this is, it clearly, it might be. Now here's the most beautiful thing. See, here's the building in the background. Right here, let's just say. But he says on a flat Earth, the horizon is only 3 miles away, so you're naturally not going to be able to see it. What he's doing is, I honestly can't, I think this guy is making fun of flat earthers. Because obviously, if the building is over here, and you gain in altitude, you can see the bottom of the building all of a sudden. And he tries to explain that, oh, that can happen on a flat earth too. No. Have you... do this for me. The next time you go to a gym, my church happens to have gyms, but a gym floor, a basketball court, put your head on the basketball court floor, okay? And then have somebody walk away from you. Do their shoes disappear as they get farther away? I mean, no, they don't. Because it doesn't. See, this is how he tries to explain that, it's just so nonsensical, it's not even funny. He said, okay, on a flat plane, this is how he explains it. On a flat plane, the horizon stays the same. It raises up to your eye level. In one of my videos, I show that a high-altitude balloon experiment clearly shows that when the balloon first takes off, the camera is almost looking at the horizon. But when the camera is 121,000 feet in the air, it's staring off into space. It's still staring straight ahead. but the horizon has fallen. But as humans, we don't notice that. It's a small few degrees, and we are naturally just drawn to it. Our eyes look down. We don't tilt our head down and keep. If our eyes were locked in the same position, we would know that we are actually tilting our vision down to look at the horizon. I mean, this is a perfect example, because as the balloon goes up, the balloon looks straight ahead. And you can see my demonstration of that in what's called Balloon Tricks. It's a video of mine. And it shows that the balloon is looking straight ahead, but the horizon has fallen. Now, to scale, this is the balloon at ground level, and this is the balloon at 121,000 feet. And the horizon does look lower. You can see it. I mean, it's perfect. And you can see that in almost every high-altitude video you see, whether it's amateur or, National Geographic or whatever. The horizon does fall away. The horizon would not fall away on a flat Earth. And that's what this person, he agrees. The horizon does not fall away. The horizon would stay right there in the same place on a flat Earth. But it doesn't when you look at high-altitude balloons. Okay, do they look slanted? How can you tell if the top is farther away from you than the bottom at that distance? It doesn't slant left or right. It slants top to bottom. Just a bit, a few degrees, you can't tell. It's not going to be massively huge because we are on a large ball. But it's quite a ways away. Now, the thing that's really funny about, there is no mirage. The bottom of the building is being blocked by the horizon. Where is the horizon? The horizon is probably, like he says, the horizon is probably 3 miles away. Well, actually, the horizon might be 4 miles away. Because if you were down on the beach, looking out over there, the horizon would only be 2 miles away. As you walk up the beach and gain in altitude, the horizon is not fixed. It moves. In some of my other videos, I stand on top of a picnic table and video, then I move the tripod down to ground level, and you can see the horizon shorten. You can see things that used to be observable on top of the picnic table, moving only 32 inches closer to the ground. You can't see those objects anymore. The horizon moves. It is not fixed, like he says. And that can only happen on a ball. It can't happen on a flat Earth. The horizon does not move on a flat Earth. That is the only point in this whole video he got right. The horizon would stay the same. And as you raised up, it would stay the exact same place. But on a ball, it moves. Any change in observation height changes where that horizon is. Notice the horizon is here, but here the horizon is here. Here the horizon is here. See, from this point the horizon is here. From this point the horizon is here. From this point the horizon is over here. This is called a tangent, where a straight line touches a curve. He tries to explain that can happen on a flat Earth too. Then he turns right around and shows you, but it really doesn't. So he shows you the horizon doesn't fall. That's his main point. It stays exactly the same place. But you can see in high altitude videos where it plainly does. So another point he wants to make is, now see how wide that sun is? It is 1, 2, 3, 4 convergence lines wide. Okay? At this point, it's 7. At this point, it's what? 20 convergence. It's not getting smaller. Everything else is getting smaller, but the sun doesn't get smaller. Notice that in all the flat earth videos. They violate the laws of perspective they're claiming that they follow. Because the sun doesn't get smaller, the moon doesn't get smaller. You can't play the video trick with the moon especially. Everybody knows it stays exactly the same. I even have a flat earth cardboard test where you can look through a tube and you can observe the moon rise to moon set, and at apex it stays the same size. But in this thing, it grows gigantically. Look at the telephone pole. Look at the pole. Here it is. It's covering X amount number of convergence lines. Here it's covering the exact same amount of convergence lines, but it's half the size. That's because that's what perspective is. It's a drawing term. It is not something that you can apply to nature. Now, he says this is where he got this. It goes up, it goes down, and there's these lines here. And this is how it's moving. Even though it's actually moving flat above your head, that's what it looks like. Well, notice down here, it is approximately 600 times the size as when it's straight over his head. Totally violates perspective, but he knows it stays the same size. And he talks about another aspect of this. He shows, see, here's how you see it. Okay? The suns are the same size. But notice down here, over here on the left, the sun has violated the very laws of perspective that he's claiming that he's observing. They're lying flat out to you. They are using fancy terms and words. Perspective applies to drawing only. It's an optical illusion. It's not real. The sun does not float in a flat path over the top of you. As a matter of fact, it goes in an arc like this, because in an arc, it does stay the same size. He is correct that it would look like that, but the sun would be disappearing into a tiny dot. And he denies that it disappears into a tiny dot. He said it stays, the same size. It's huge. Even though everything else around it is disappearing. You've all seen a plane fly away. How big is an L-1011 if you're next to it? And how big is it if it's 35, 60 miles away? It's a tiny dot. But, oh no, the sun and the moon don't do that in this in this person's world, which is a fantasy. It's not reality. There's no way it can stay the exact same size. So that is the silliness of flat Earth. How they say globe Earth violates the laws of nature. It violates everything, and flat Earth works perfectly because it's always perfect. Oh yeah? Look at the size of that sun. It's not following the convergence lines. It's growing astronomically. And they said, well, yeah, that's because it's what? Everything shrinks as it moves away from you. Even a building, as you go up in an airplane and fly across the land, the building doesn't stay the same size. You've moved away from it and it shrinks, but somehow the sun stays the same size. These people just drive me absolutely bonkers, because why do people believe this? They look right at it. Don't you have any powers of observation and cognitive thought to go, wait a minute, the sun isn't following the lines of convergence. It's huge. It's actually 600% more than what it's the only thing that does that. It's just nuttiness beyond belief. I mean, this is a perfect illustration of how massive that sun has gotten from this position to this position. But this guy knows beyond he's making fun of you. I truly, honestly don't believe that Stinky Cash believes in what he's saying, because he is saying the opposite of about 70% of flat earthers out there, because they claim that the sun shrinks as it moves away from you. It turns into a little dot. So he's bucking the trend. I think this is a scam video. I think he's making fun of you. If he really honestly does believe in what he's saying, probably needs to be institutionalized. I mean, it can't get much plainer than that. He doesn't even know the terms he's discussing. He's discussing drawing terms, drawing items on a piece of paper. It's an optical illusion. It has nothing to do with what's happening in reality. He desperately tries to explain how several things occur, but honestly, in the end, since he differs from about 70% of all the other flat earthers out there, I think it's a scam video. I think it's a troll video. It's meant to push your intelligence. Apparently some people who send me the links don't get that. They think it's real. They think it's a really good explanation, but once you look at it, it's absolutely nutty. So that's why I say don't be fooled by their presentations. They're slick. I mean, Stinky Cash, once but if you slow down, take a look at it, and you start to say, what? Because none of it makes sense. So please like and subscribe to me. Spread the word. Keep the truth flowing. And let's get this silliness out of here, please. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. This has been Mark with Productions MJC.